When I found my daughter on her knees scrubbing the floor of the $3.6 million mansion I bought for her, she did not even look at me. She just flinched as if expecting a blow. She did not recognize the man standing at the gate was her father. I watched my little girl behaving like a servant in her own home, and I felt something cold and hard settle in my chest. I calmly reached into my pocket for my burner phone, dialed my lawyer, and whispered 4 words. Activate option 0. It is time for justice. If you have ever had to fight for your family, hit that like button and subscribe, because this story is about to get very ugly before it gets beautiful. My name is Reginald Blackwood, and I am 72 years old. For the last 13 years, the world thought I was dead. They were wrong. I was just away surviving things most men would not believe. But nothing I endured in those dark years prepared me for the bright, sunny Tuesday when I finally came home to Hidden Hills, California. I stepped out of a yellow taxi that looked like a rust bucket compared to the gleaming machines parked in the driveways of this gated community. I wore a coat that had seen better decades and boots that were falling apart at the seams. To anyone watching, I looked like a homeless man who had taken a wrong turn. But they did not know that the deed to the property at the end of the cul-de-sac was sitting in a steel safe halfway across the world with my signature on it. I walked up the long, winding driveway lined with the imported palm trees I had personally selected years ago. The house was magnificent, a sprawling Mediterranean villa that glowed in the afternoon sun. I had bought this place with cash 13 years ago as a wedding gift for my daughter Sarah. It was supposed to be her sanctuary. But as I got closer, the image of paradise shattered. Near the heavy iron gates, a figure was crouched on the pavement. It was a woman wearing a gray uniform that looked 2 sizes too big and stained with old sweat. She was on her hands and knees, scrubbing a patch of oil on the driveway. I squinted against the sun. She was using a tiny toothbrush. My heart hammered against my ribs as I walked closer. The woman was thin, too thin. Her collarbones stuck out sharply against the fabric of her uniform, and her hands were red and raw. She stopped scrubbing to wipe sweat from her forehead, and that was when I saw her face. It was Sarah. My Sarah. But the light was gone from her eyes. She looked 20 years older than her 32 years. Her hair, which used to be golden and shiny, was dull and tied back in a messy knot. I felt like someone had punched me in the throat. I took a step forward, my boots crunching on the gravel. Sarah flinched violently. She dropped the toothbrush and curled into herself, covering her head with her arms. "Please do not tell him," she whimpered, her voice shaking with a terror that no human being should ever feel. "I promise I will get it clean, sir. I am scrubbing as hard as I can. Please do not report me to the master." The master. The word hung in the air like a poisonous cloud. I stood there frozen, unable to comprehend what I was hearing. "Sarah, look at me," I said, my voice rough from disuse. "It is me. It is Dad." She slowly lowered her arms and looked up at me. Her eyes were empty. There was no recognition, no spark of memory, nothing. She looked at me like I was a stranger, or worse, like I was another threat. "You are not supposed to be here," she whispered, looking around frantically. "If the master sees you, he will be angry. He hates strangers. You need to go, old man. Please go before he hurts us both." She did not know me. 13 years was a long time, but a father knows his child, and a child knows her father. Something was terribly wrong. Before I could say another word, the roar of an engine cut through the quiet afternoon. A silver Porsche 911 tore up the driveway, going way too fast. I had to jump back into the hedges to avoid being hit. The car screeched to a halt just inches from where Sarah was kneeling. She did not move away. She just lowered her head until it touched the pavement like a servant bowing to a king. The driver's side door flew open, and a man stepped out. It was Bradley Cooper, my son-in-law. He was wearing a suit that probably cost more than the taxi I arrived in, and a watch that glared in the sunlight. He looked exactly the same as I remembered him, only now his face was heavier with arrogance. From the passenger side, a woman stepped out. It was not Sarah. It was a younger woman with dark hair and sharp features, wearing designer sunglasses and holding a tiny dog. This was Courtney. I did not know who she was, but the way she clung to Bradley told me everything. Bradley walked around the front of the car and looked down at Sarah. He did not ask if she was okay. He did not help her up. Instead, he kicked the plastic bucket of soapy water she had been using, sending it skidding across the driveway, water splashing onto Sarah's uniform. "I told you to have this oil stain gone before I got home," Bradley shouted, his face twisting into a mask of rage. "You are useless, Sarah. Absolutely useless. Do I have to do everything myself?" Sarah scrambled to grab the bucket, her hands shaking so hard she could barely hold it. "I am sorry, Bradley. I mean, sir," she stammered. "I tried, but the stain is deep. I will scrub harder. I promise." Courtney laughed, a high-pitched, cruel sound that made my blood boil. "Oh, leave it, babe," she said, looking at Sarah with pure disgust. "She is too stupid to do it right. Just hire a professional service and take the money out of her food budget. She eats too much anyway." That was it. The dam inside me broke. I stepped out from his hedges, my hands balled into fists in my coat pockets. "Do not speak to her like that," I growled, my voice low and dangerous. Bradley spun around, startled. He looked me up and down, taking in my ragged coat, my dirty boots, and my unkempt gray beard. He curled his lip in a sneer. "Who the hell are you?" he demanded, stepping between me and Sarah as if protecting his property. "How did you get in here? This is a private residence. Get off my land before I call the cops and have you thrown in a cell." I looked at him and then at Sarah, who was still on her knees, trembling. I wanted to tear him apart right there. I wanted to tell him that I owned the ground he stood on, that I had built this empire while he was still playing video games in his mother's basement. But I knew better. If I revealed who I was now, without knowing the full extent of the situation, I would lose my advantage. I needed to know why Sarah did not remember me. I needed to know why she was a servant in her own home. I needed to know where the money went. So I swallowed my pride. I let my shoulders slump. I made myself look smaller, older, weaker. "I am not a beggar," I said, keeping my voice steady but rough. "I am family." Bradley barked out a laugh. "Family? Look at you. You look like you just crawled out of a sewer. Sarah has no family. Her father died 13 years ago. He was a loser who abandoned her and died in some ditch in Mexico. Everyone knows that. Now turn around and walk away, or I will have my dogs chase you out." I did not move. I reached into the inside pocket of my coat. Bradley flinched, thinking I had a weapon. Courtney let out a little scream and hid behind him. But I did not pull out a gun. I pulled out a photograph. It was a Polaroid, battered and creased at the corners, protected by a plastic sleeve. It showed a younger me, strong and smiling, holding a teenage Sarah on her graduation day. We were standing in front of this very house before the landscaping grew in. "I am Reginald Blackwood," I said, staring straight into Bradley's eyes. "I am her father, and I just got out of prison." The silence that followed was absolute. Bradley's face went pale. He looked from the photo to me and back again. I could see the gears turning in his head. He was not afraid of me because I looked tough. He was afraid because if Sarah's father was alive, it complicated things. It complicated the inheritance. It complicated the ownership of the house. It complicated his perfect little life with his mistress. Courtney tugged on his sleeve. "Babe, is he telling the truth? I thought you said the old man was dead. You said there was nobody left to claim the estate." Bradley shook her off, his eyes never leaving mine. He was assessing me, calculating the risk. He saw an old man, a convict, someone with no money and no power. He saw a nuisance, not a threat, and that was his first mistake. He took a step closer, invading my personal space, trying to intimidate me. So the dead man walks, he sneered, dropping his voice so Sarah could not hear. You think you can just show up here after 13 years and play daddy? You think you can get a piece of the pie? Let me tell you something, old man. There is no pie left. I ate it all. I held his gaze, my expression unreadable. I do not want your pie, I lied. I have nowhere to go. I served my time. I just want to see my daughter. I have rights, Bradley. Even ex-cons have rights. Bradley laughed again, but it was a nervous sound. He looked at Sarah, who was watching us with wide, fearful eyes. She still did not seem to understand who I was. He looked back at me, and a cruel smile spread across his face. You want to stay? He asked, mocking me. Fine. You can stay. But you are not living in the guest rooms. Those are for humans. If you want a roof over your head, you can sleep in the basement. You earn your keep. You do not speak to me or Courtney unless spoken to, and you stay away from the second floor. Do we have a deal, old man? I looked at my daughter still kneeling in the dirt. I looked at the man who had enslaved her. I clenched my jaw so hard my teeth ached. I would sleep on a bed of nails if it meant getting close enough to burn his world to the ground. Deal, I said. Bradley smirked, thinking he had won, thinking he had just gained another servant, another victim to torment. He had no idea he had just invited the executioner into his home. Get your trash and go around the back, he ordered, snapping his fingers at me like I was a dog. Sarah, show him the basement. And if he steals so much as a silver spoon, I will put both of you out on the street. Sarah stood up slowly, wiping her hands on her apron. She looked at me with wariness, but also a flicker of curiosity. Come this way, she whispered, keeping her head down. I followed her past the shiny Porsche, past the manicured gardens, and into the shadows of the house I had built for her happiness. The war had begun, and Bradley Cooper did not even know he was already losing. Bradley shoved me toward the back of the house, his hand heavy and disrespectful on my shoulder. I kept my head down, playing the part of the broken old convict, but my eyes were sharp, recording everything. The interior of the villa had changed. When I bought this place 13 years ago, I filled the walls with art. There was an original Dali in the foyer, and a rare collection of indigenous tapestries in the hallway. Now they were gone. In their place hung massive, vulgar portraits of Bradley and Courtney. He was posing like a king on a throne, and she was draped over him like a trophy. My legacy had been stripped away and replaced by his vanity. The marble floors I had imported from Italy were scuffed and dirty in the corners. It was clear that while Bradley liked the appearance of wealth, he had no idea how to maintain it. Or rather, he forced Sarah to do it all, and one exhausted woman could not maintain a 10,000-square-foot mansion alone. He stopped at a narrow door near the kitchen pantry. This used to be the utility closet where the heating units were stored. He kicked it open, revealing a steep wooden staircase that smelled of damp earth and neglect. Down you go, old man, Bradley sneered. There is a cot in the corner. Do not get comfortable. You are only here until I decide what to do with you. If I catch you wandering upstairs, I will break your legs. And do not think about stealing anything. I have cameras everywhere. I looked into the dark abyss of the basement, then back at him. I did not say a word. I just nodded slowly like a beaten dog. He laughed that same cruel bark and slammed the door behind me. I heard the heavy click of a deadbolt sliding into place. I stood in the darkness for a moment, letting my eyes adjust. The air was cold and stale. I walked down the creaking stairs, my boots heavy on the wood. The basement was a concrete box filled with discarded furniture and boxes. It was freezing. In the corner, just as he said, was a stained mattress on the floor. There were no sheets, no blankets, just a thin gray pillow. This was where he expected his father-in-law to sleep. This was where he kept the man who paid for the roof over his head. I sat on the edge of the mattress and waited. I knew the game had just begun. Hours later, when the house above had fallen silent, I heard a scratching sound at the basement door. The lock turned slowly and the door creaked open. A beam of light cut through the darkness. It was Sarah. She was carrying a plastic plate with a half-eaten sandwich and a bottle of water. She moved silently, her bare feet making no sound on the concrete. She looked like a ghost in her own home. She placed the food on a crate near me and backed away quickly, hugging herself against the cold. "Sarah," I whispered, standing up slowly so I would not frighten her. "You do not have to be afraid of me. I am your father. Do you remember anything? Do you remember the pony I bought you? Do you remember how we used to sing Moon River when you were scared of the thunder?" She flinched at my voice. She looked at me with wide, terrified eyes. Her hands were trembling violently. "The master says I do not have a father," she recited, her voice flat and robotic. "The master says my father was a bad man who left me. You are just a stranger. You eat and then you sleep. Do not make noise. If you make noise, the master gets a headache. And when he gets a headache, he punishes us." I felt my heart shatter in my chest. It was not just amnesia. It was brainwashing. Systematic psychological torture. She called him the master. Not Bradley. Not her husband. The master. I took a step closer, and she whimpered, cowering against a stack of boxes. I stopped. I could not force her to remember. I had to be patient. "Why are you down here, Sarah?" I asked gently. "Why are you not in your room?" "I live here," she whispered, pointing to a pile of rags in the far corner behind the furnace. I did not even see it before. It was a nest like an animal would make. "The master says I am not allowed upstairs at night. I am dirty. I make the sheets dirty. I have to stay here where I belong." I looked at the pile of rags, then at my daughter, the heiress to a dynasty, sleeping next to a furnace like a stray dog. Rage, hot and blinding, flooded my veins. I wanted to run upstairs and strangle Bradley Cooper with my bare hands. I wanted to burn this house down with him inside. But I forced myself to breathe. Violence would only get me arrested, and Sarah would be left alone with him. I needed to be smarter. I needed to be colder. "Go to sleep, child," I said, my voice thick with unshed tears. "I will watch over you. Nothing will hurt you tonight. Not while I am here." She stared at me for a long moment, confusion warring with fear in her eyes. Then she scurried back to her corner and curled up on the rags, pulling a thin blanket over her head. I watched her until her breathing evened out. I did not sleep. I prowled the basement like a caged tiger, looking for answers. On a dusty shelf near her sleeping area, I saw a small orange prescription bottle. It looked out of place among the cobwebs and old paint cans. I picked it up and squinted to read the label in the dim light coming from the small high window. The name on the bottle was Sarah Cooper. The prescribing doctor was a name I did not recognize, Dr. Aris Thorne. I read the drug name, clozapine. My blood ran cold. I knew what this was. It was a heavy-duty antipsychotic used for severe schizophrenia. It was a chemical lobotomy, and the dosage was insane. 3 times the normal limit. I opened the bottle and shook a pill into my hand. It was a small yellow tablet. Innocuous. Deadly. This was why she was a zombie. This was why she had no memory. They were not just beating her down, they were drugging her into submission. They were frying her brain so she would be a compliant slave. This was not medical care. This was poison. I looked at Sarah sleeping fitfully in the corner, twitching in her drug-induced dreams. They had stolen her mind. They had stolen her life. And they were doing it right under the nose of the law, using a prescription pad as a weapon. I tipped the pill into my pocket. I needed evidence. I needed to know exactly what was in this and how much damage it had done. I put the bottle back exactly where I found it. My hand was shaking not from age but from a fury so profound it felt like ice in my veins. Bradley Cooper had made a fatal error. He thought he was dealing with a helpless old man. He did not know he was dealing with a man who had survived the cartels, a man who knew how to dismantle an enemy piece by piece. I retreated to the shadows furthest from the stairs. I sat on a crate and reached for my left boot. It was old leather, cracked and worn, but the heel was thick and solid. I twisted the heel to the right. It clicked and detached, revealing a hollow compartment. Inside, wrapped in protective foam, was a device no larger than a credit card. It was a satellite phone, encrypted, military-grade, untraceable. It was the only thing I had brought back from my years in exile. I powered it on. The tiny screen glowed with a faint blue light. I had no signal in this concrete tomb, but I knew the uplink protocol. I held it up toward the small basement window, pressing it against the glass. It searched for a satellite. 1 bar, 2 bars, connected. I typed a message with my thumbs, my movements fast and precise. The old man was gone. The operator was back. To Sullivan. Secure line. Subject Sarah Blackwood. Condition critical. Evidence of chemical restraint. Obtained sample of unknown antipsychotic. Need immediate toxicology analysis and background on Dr. Eris Thorne. Also, pull the original deed to the Hidden Hills property. I need to know how she signed it over. Activate asset recovery team. We are going to war. I hit send. The message vanished into the digital ether, flying across the world to the only man I trusted. Sullivan was not just a lawyer. He was a shark in a suit, a man who could freeze assets and destroy reputations with a single phone call. He had been holding my fortune for 13 years, waiting for my return. I slid the phone back into my boot and locked the heel into place. I sat in the dark, listening to the hum of the furnace and the shallow breathing of my daughter. Above my head, the floorboards creaked. Bradley was walking around up there, probably drinking my wine and laughing with his mistress. He thought he was the king of the castle. He thought he had buried the past. He was wrong. The past was sitting in his basement, waiting for the sun to rise. And when it did, I would not just take back my house. I would take his life apart, brick by brick, dollar by dollar, until he was left with nothing but the shame of what he had done. I looked at the pill in my pocket. This was the key. This was the first nail in his coffin. I closed my eyes, and for the first time in 13 years, I allowed myself to smile. It was not a nice smile. It was the smile of a wolf who had just found the scent of blood. The sun went down over Hidden Hills, but inside the villa the lights were blazing like a beacon of excess. Bradley was hosting a dinner for his investors, and he wanted everything to look perfect, which meant Sarah and I had to look invisible. He came into the kitchen, throwing a bundle of fabric at Sarah. "Put this on," he barked, "and try to suck in your stomach. You look like a sack of potatoes." Sarah unfolded the garment with trembling hands. It was a Maid uniform, but it was grotesque. It was 3 sizes too small, the fabric cheap and scratching, made of polyester that smelled of mothballs. It was designed to humiliate, not to serve. She did not argue. She just went into the pantry to change. When she came out, she looked like a caricature, her movements restricted by the tight fabric, her eyes fixed on the floor in shame. Bradley turned his attention to me. "And you, old man, you are not sitting around." He tossed a pair of Italian leather loafers at my feet. "These cost $2,000. I want to see my face in them. Polish them until they shine, or you do not eat tonight." I sat on a wooden stool in the corner of the kitchen, the smell of shoe polish mixing with the aroma of roasting lamb that the hired chef was preparing. I rubbed the leather with a rhythmic motion, my mind drifting back to the days when I shined my own boots before meeting with cartel leaders in Bogota. I knew how to clean a shoe, and I knew how to clean a mess. Bradley thought he was degrading me, but he was just giving me time to think. Sarah was rushing back and forth, carrying heavy trays of appetizers, her face pale and sweaty. Every time she passed Bradley, he would whisper something cruel. "Faster, you cow." Don't drop anything. Smile. I finished the shoes. They gleamed like mirrors. Bradley snatched them from me without a thank you and slipped them on. Good, he grunted, checking his reflection in the hallway mirror. Now come upstairs. The guests want to see the entertainment. I followed him up the grand staircase, not as a guest in my own home, but as a circus animal on display. The dining room was filled with smoke and laughter. 6 men sat around the mahogany table I had commissioned in Milan years ago. They were men cut from the same cloth as Bradley, soft hands, expensive suits, and eyes that lacked souls. They were drinking my vintage wine and eating off my china. Gentleman, Bradley announced, spreading his arms wide. I present to you the father-in-law, fresh out of the state penitentiary. The men roared with laughter. They looked at me with a mix of amusement and disgust. One of them, a fat man with a red face and a cigar, pointed at me with his fork. So this is the ghost. Bradley told us you were dead. I died for a while, I said, my voice flat. But I came back. Bradley poured himself a glass of wine and clapped a hand on my shoulder, squeezing hard enough to bruise. He is a little senile, he said, winking at his guests. We let him sleep in the basement out of charity. You know how it is. Family obligations. Another man, a thin lawyer type with reptile eyes, leaned forward. You are a saint, Bradley. Most people would have thrown him to the curb. But tell us more about the house. The transfer was finalized. Bradley beamed, puffing out his chest. Oh, absolutely. It was a masterstroke, if I do say so myself. Since my dear wife Sarah was unfortunately diagnosed with early-onset dementia and severe incompetence, the court granted me full conservatorship. I am the legal guardian of her person and her assets. The lawyer nodded approvingly. Smart move. Conservatorships are the golden ticket. You control the money, you control the decisions, and you have zero liability. And since the property was technically in her name, it is all mine now, Bradley finished, clinking his glass against the lawyer's. I transferred the deed last week. Just to keep it safe, of course. We would not want Sarah making any bad decisions in her condition. I stood there, my hands clasped behind my back, listening to him confess to grand larceny and fraud, as if he were discussing a golf handicap. He had used the medical records he forged to declare Sarah incompetent. He had used the legal system to strip her of her rights. It was the same game con artists had been playing for decades, but Bradley played it with a special kind of malice. He did not just want the money. He wanted to own her. He looked at me, his eyes glittering with malice. Pour the wine, old man. Make yourself useful. I took the bottle. It was a Chateau Margaux 1996. I remembered buying it at an auction in London. I moved around the table, pouring the wine with the steady hand of a man who used to dismantle explosives. I listened to them joke about evicting widows and cutting corners on construction projects. They were vultures picking at the carcass of the life I had built. When I reached Courtney, she was sitting at the other end of the table, acting the part of the lady of the house. She was wearing Sarah's diamond necklace. I recognized the stone. I had bought it for Sarah's 21st birthday. Courtney looked at me with a sneer, her lips stained purple with wine. Watch what you are doing, jailbird, she snapped. Do not spill it on my dress. This is silk. I poured carefully, not spilling a drop. But as I turned to leave, she stuck out her foot. It was subtle, a quick movement of her stiletto heel hooking around my ankle. I stumbled. The bottle slipped from my hand, but I caught it before it hit the floor. However, a splash of red wine flew out and landed on the sleeve of my ragged coat, and a few drops hit the white tablecloth. The room went silent. Courtney let out a dramatic gasp. Look what you did, she shrieked, standing up and pointing a manicured finger at me. You clumsy idiot! You ruined the table setting. Bradley, look at this mess. Bradley was on his feet in a second. His face turned a violent shade of red. You useless old fool, he shouted, throwing his napkin down. Can you do nothing right? Sarah, get in here. Sarah ran in from the kitchen, her eyes wide with panic. She saw the wine on the tablecloth and immediately dropped to her knees. She pulled a rag from her apron and started scrubbing frantically, her hands shaking so hard she was making it worse. I am sorry, sir, she sobbed, tears streaming down her face. Please do not be mad. I will clean it. I will bleach it. Please do not send him away. Do not hurt him. She was begging for me. Even in her broken state, she was trying to protect me. Courtney stood over her, laughing softly, enjoying the show. Look at them, she said to the guests. Like father, like daughter. Both of them are pathetic. Maybe we should make him lick it up. That would teach him a lesson. I felt a heat rise in my chest that had nothing to do with the temperature of the room. It was the cold, focused rage of a soldier. My hand twitched toward the steak knife lying on the table. It would be so easy. 2 steps. 1 movement. Silence. But I stopped myself. Killing them now would be mercy. They did not deserve mercy. They deserved to lose everything. They deserved to feel the same helplessness they had inflicted on Sarah. I took a deep breath, forcing my muscles to relax. I bowed my head, playing the part. I am sorry, Mom, I mumbled. My hands, they shake sometimes. Bradley scoffed. Get out of my sight. Both of you. Go back to your hole before I lose my appetite. Sarah scrambled up, grabbing my arm and pulling me toward the kitchen. Come on, Dad, she whispered. Please, before he changes his mind. We retreated to the kitchen, but I did not go downstairs immediately. I stayed in the shadows of the doorway, watching. Bradley was laughing again, apologizing to his guests for the interruption. We are out of the good stuff, he announced, holding up the empty bottle. But do not worry, I have a reserve in the wall safe. The old man who lived here before had great taste. He walked over to the large oil painting of himself that hung on the far wall. He swung it open, revealing a steel wall safe. It was my safe, the one I had installed. He stood with his back to the room, blocking the keypad with his body so the guests could not see. But he forgot one thing. It was dark outside, and the floor-to-ceiling windows in the dining room had turned into mirrors. I watched his reflection in the glass. I saw his hand move. He typed in a 6-digit code. 3, 8, 1, 9, 0, 5. My eyes narrowed. 381905. It was not a random number. It was the date Sarah and he had met. March 8, 2005. He was sentimental about the day he found his golden goose. The safe clicked open. I saw stacks of cash, legal documents, and velvet jewelry boxes. He grabbed another bottle of wine and slammed the safe shut, spinning the lock. I stepped back into the shadows, a cold smile touching my lips. I had what I needed. The humiliation, the wine, the degradation, it was all worth it. I had the combination. And tonight, while the predators slept, the prey would start hunting. I went down to the basement, not as a prisoner, but as a man who had just been handed the keys to the kingdom. The next morning, the house was quiet. Bradley and his mistress had left early for a brunch at the country club, leaving Sarah with a list of chores that would take 3 people a full day to complete. I watched my daughter scrubbing the grout in the foyer with raw, bleeding fingers, and I knew I had a window of opportunity. I slipped past her silently, my boots making no sound on the marble. She was humming a tune under her breath, a fractured melody that sounded like a lullaby I used to sing to her. It broke my heart, but it also steeled my resolve. I was not just here to watch. I was here to investigate. I went straight for the master bedroom. The door was locked, but to a man who had spent 13 years navigating the underworld, a standard interior lock was a joke. I used a thin piece of metal from a paperclip I found in the kitchen, and the lock clicked open in seconds. The room that used to be my sanctuary was now a shrine to Bradley's ego. Mirrors on the ceiling, animal skin rugs on the floor, and the smell of cheap musk hanging in the air. I ignored the vulgarity and went straight to the desk in the corner. It was a modern glass monstrosity piled high with unpaid bills and gambling slips. I started digging. I did not care about his debts. I knew he was broke. I was looking for the paper trail of my daughter's destruction. I found it in the bottom drawer, hidden under a stack of car magazines. A thick manila folder labeled Sarah Medical. My hands trembled slightly as I opened it. Inside were documents that detailed a car accident 5 years ago. According to the report, Sarah had been driving and had lost control, hitting a tree. The diagnosis was severe traumatic brain injury resulting in cognitive regression and memory loss. But as I flipped through the pages, I found something that made my blood boil. Stapled to the back of the medical report was a receipt from a luxury car dealership. It was an invoice for a silver Porsche 911 Turbo. The date on the invoice was August 15th, 2019. I looked back at the accident report. The date of Sarah's accident was August 14th, 2019. The very next day. He did not spend the day at the hospital praying for his wife. He spent the day buying a $200,000 sports car with the insurance payout. My phone vibrated against my ankle. I pulled it out. It was the message from Sullivan I had been waiting for. The screen glowed with text that confirmed my darkest fears. Analysis complete. The yellow pill is not just clozapine. It is a custom compound. High-dose benzodiazepines mixed with a hallucinogen similar to scopolamine. It is designed to induce compliance memory fragmentation and a state of permanent confusion. This is not treatment, Reginald. This is chemical lobotomy. He is erasing her. I stared at the phone, my vision blurring with red rage. Benzodiazepines and scopolamine. He was drugging her to keep her docile, to keep her from remembering who she was and who I was. He was keeping her in a fog so deep she would sign anything he put in front of her, including the deed to this house. This was not a husband. This was a parasite feeding on the mind of the woman he promised to protect. I took a picture of the medical report and the car invoice. Then I carefully put everything back exactly as I found it. I locked the bedroom door behind me and went downstairs. I went into the kitchen. I could hear Sarah in the laundry room, the rhythmic thumping of the washing machine covering the sound of my movements. I went to the cabinet where they kept her medicine. I took the orange bottle down. My hand moved with the speed of a magician. From my pocket, I pulled a small plastic bag. Inside were simple yellow vitamin B tablets I had found in the pantry earlier. They looked almost identical to the poison he was feeding her. I dumped the toxic pills into my pocket and filled the orange bottle with the vitamins. It was a risk. If she went into withdrawal, it would be messy. But it was better than letting her brain rot for one more day. I needed her to wake up. I needed the fog to lift. I screwed the cap back on and placed the bottle on the counter just as Sarah walked in. She looked exhausted, her eyes glazed over. "Time for your medicine, Sarah," I said, my voice gentle. She looked at the bottle and flinched. "No, please," she whispered. "It makes me tired. It makes the shadows move." "You have to take it, child," I said, forcing a smile I did not feel. "The master wants you to be healthy." She nodded obediently, conditioned to follow orders. She took the bottle, shook out 2 of the vitamin tablets, and swallowed them dry. I watched her throat move. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell her that I was saving her. But I had to play the long game. The vitamins would flush her system. In 24 hours, the hallucinations would stop. In 48 hours, her memory would start to flicker back. And when it did, I would be there to catch her. Suddenly, the front door slammed open. Heavy footsteps echoed in the hallway. Bradley was back early. Too early. He stormed into the kitchen, his face flushed with anger and alcohol. He stopped dead when he saw me standing near Sarah. The air in the room instantly grew heavy with violence. "What are you doing in here, old man?" he spat. throwing his keys on the counter. I told you to stay in the basement during the day. And you, Sarah, why are you not scrubbing the patio? I was just getting water, sir, I mumbled, lowering my head. Liar, Bradley shouted. He crossed the room in 2 strides and grabbed Sarah by the arm. He yanked her so hard she stumbled and fell against the refrigerator. I told you not to talk to him. I told you he is dangerous. Are you plotting something? Is that it? Are you two plotting against me in my own house? No, Bradley. Please, Sarah cried, cowering away from him. We were not talking. I took my medicine. I promise. He raised his hand and slapped her. The sound was like a whip crack in the kitchen. Sarah cried out and fell to the floor, holding her cheek. That was it. The mask slipped. I stepped forward, my hands coming out of my pockets. Do not touch her again, I said, my voice dropping an octave into a growl that had terrified men much harder than him. Bradley spun around, his eyes widening in surprise. You want to be a hero, old man, he sneered. You want to protect the retard. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a gun. It was a chrome-plated pistol, flashy and expensive, just like everything else he owned. He pointed it directly at my chest. This is my property, he yelled, his hand shaking slightly. I can shoot you right now and tell the police you attacked me. Who are they going to believe? The wealthy grieving husband or the ex-con trespasser? Get back in your hole before I paint the kitchen with your brains. I looked at the gun, then at his eyes. He was scared. A man with a gun who is scared is dangerous, but a man who knows he is losing control is worse. I slowly raised my hands, not in surrender, but in a gesture of calm. I backed away toward the basement door, my eyes never leaving his. I memorized the way he held the weapon, his finger too tight on the trigger. He did not know how to use it. But today was not the day to test that. I am going, I said quietly. Just calm down. Bradley kicked Sarah in the leg. Get up, you useless cow. Go to your room and lock the door. And you, old man, if I see your face before tomorrow morning, I will not hesitate. I backed into the darkness of the basement and closed the door. I heard the lock slide home. I sat on the stairs in the dark, listening to him screaming at my daughter upstairs. My hands were steady, but my heart was burning. He had pulled a gun on me. He had escalated the game. Good. That meant he was desperate, and desperate men make mistakes. I touched the pocket where the stolen poison pills were hidden. I had the evidence. I had the witness. And soon I would have my daughter back. The countdown had begun. I stared down the barrel of the chrome-plated pistol and saw my death, reflected in Bradley Cooper's wide, panicked eyes. His hand was shaking so badly, the muzzle drifted in erratic circles over my chest. A smarter man would have begged. A weaker man would have dropped to his knees and pleaded for his life. But I had spent the last decade staring down men who killed for sport, and Bradley was just a frightened amateur holding a toy he did not understand. I knew he did not have the guts to pull the trigger in cold blood, but accidents happen when cowards get nervous. I needed to freeze him, not with force, but with fear. Go ahead, Bradley, I said, my voice dropping to a conversational whisper that seemed to echo in the silent kitchen. Pull the trigger. Put a bullet in my heart right here on the Italian marble. But before you do, ask yourself one question. Do you know what is buried under the concrete slab in the old garage? Bradley blinked, the gun dipping slightly. What are you talking about, old man? You are crazy. Am I asked, taking a slow, deliberate step toward him. I bought this house 13 years ago, Bradley. I renovated it from the ground up. And when they poured the foundation for the detached garage, there was a little discrepancy with a contractor who tried to extort me. He disappeared. The concrete was poured the next morning. I saw the color drain from his face. It was a lie, of course. I was a businessman, not a murderer. But Bradley was a con artist, and con artists always believe that everyone else is as dirty as they are. He knew the world was full of skeletons because his closet was bursting with them. He swallowed hard, his eyes darting toward the window that overlooked the driveway. If you shoot me, I continued, pressing my advantage, the police will come. They will investigate. They will bring in forensic teams and cadaver dogs. And when those dogs start barking at the garage floor, they will dig. And they will find what I left there. And they will find what you have been hiding too. Are you ready for them to start digging, Bradley? Are you ready for them to look closely at Sarah's accident report? He lowered the gun. The threat of an investigation terrified him more than the man standing in front of him. He was a parasite who thrived in the dark, and I had just threatened to turn on the floodlights. "Get downstairs," he hissed, backing away until he hit the counter. "Get in the basement and lock the door. If I hear a sound, if you so much as sneeze, I will burn this house down with you in it." I did not smile, though I wanted to. I had won. I turned my back on him, a final gesture of dominance, and walked calmly to the basement door. I stepped into the darkness and heard the heavy deadbolt slide home, sealing me in. I sat on the cold concrete floor and listened to his footsteps retreat. I was a prisoner in my own home, locked in a damp box while a predator slept in my bed. But the darkness did not scare me. I had lived in darkness for 13 years. 13 years ago, I did not abandon my daughter. I was taken. I had flown to Mexico to close a deal on a chain of resorts. I never made it to the meeting. I was grabbed off the street by a rival cartel who wanted my land. They threw me in a hole in the ground, a literal pit in the desert, covered by a metal grate. They demanded a ransom that no one could pay because I had frozen my assets to protect Sarah. For 5 years, I lived in that hole. I ate scraps. I drank rainwater. I kept my sanity by replaying memories of Sarah's childhood in my mind. When I finally escaped during a raid, I was a ghost. I had no money, no ID, and a price on my head. I could not come home. If I contacted Sarah, the people hunting me would find her. So I died. I let the world believe Reginald Blackwood was gone. I stayed in the shadows, rebuilding my fortune dollar by dollar, brick by brick, waiting for the day it was safe to return. I sent letters, hundreds of them. I sent them through intermediaries, through lawyers, through encrypted channels. I told her I loved her. I told her to be safe. Now I knew where those letters went. Bradley had intercepted them. He had erased me from existence so he could rewrite history. He had turned my sacrifice into a weapon against my daughter. He told her I was a junkie, a loser, a man who left because he did not love her. He poisoned her mind against me long before he started poisoning her body with drugs. I clenched my fists in the dark. I had stayed away to protect her, and my absence had destroyed her. That guilt was a heavier weight than any chain. But guilt is useless unless you turn it into fuel. I was done mourning the lost years. It was time to fight for the future. I stood up and walked to the door. It was a solid oak door reinforced with steel, but the lock was a standard residential deadbolt. Bradley had installed it to keep Sarah in, not to keep a professional out. I pulled a thin piece of high-tensile wire from the hem of my coat. It was a tool I always carried, a habit from my days on the run. I slid it into the keyhole. I closed my eyes, feeling the pins inside the mechanism. Click, click, click. The lock turned with a soft snap. I pushed the door open just an inch. The house was silent. It was 3 a.m, the witching hour. I slipped off my boots and moved into the hallway in my socks. I was a shadow drifting through the corridors I had designed. I avoided the creaky floorboard on the 3rd step. I knew the rhythm of this house better than the man who claimed to own it. I crept up the stairs to the 2nd floor. The door to the master bedroom was slightly ajar. I could hear the rhythmic snoring of Bradley and the soft breathing of Courtney. They slept the sleep of the arrogant, believing they were untouchable. I slid into the room, keeping low. The moonlight filtered through the sheer curtains, illuminating the bed where my son-in-law lay tangled in sheets that cost $1,000. I crawled across the carpet, moving toward the nightstand on Bradley's side of the bed. I reached under the heavy wooden frame. My fingers brushed against the dust bunnies until I found a flat surface on the back leg of the table. I pulled a small adhesive disc from my pocket. It was a listening device no bigger than a button, another souvenir from my time abroad. I pressed it firmly against the wood. It blinked once, a tiny red eye in the dark, and then went active. I did not stop there. I moved to the walk-in closet. I found Bradley's briefcase sitting on a bench. I opened it carefully. Inside were stacks of gambling slips, notices of overdue loans, and a brochure for a facility called Shady Pines Psychiatric Institute. I took a picture of the brochure with my burner phone. It was not a hospital. It was a warehouse for the unwanted, a place where families dumped their elderly and infirm to be forgotten. This was his plan. This was where he intended to send us. I closed the briefcase and slipped back out of the room. I was halfway down the stairs when I heard a noise. A toilet flushed. Footsteps crossed the landing above. I froze, pressing myself into the alcove where a statue used to stand. Bradley appeared at the top of the stairs, rubbing his eyes. He looked down into the darkness of the foyer. "Did you hear that, babe?" Courtney called from the bedroom, her voice sleepy. "Just the house settling." Bradley grunted. "Or maybe it is the rats in the basement. I need to call the exterminator tomorrow. After we sell this dump, I never want to hear a creaking floorboard again." He turned and went back into the bedroom, slamming the door. I let out a breath I did not know I was holding. Sell the dump. He was moving faster than I thought. I retreated to the basement and locked the door from the inside, resetting the pins so it would look like it had never been opened. I sat on my cot and pulled out the earpiece connected to the bug I had just planted. The audio was crystal clear. "We cannot wait another week," Bradley was saying, his voice agitated. "The old man is trouble. Did you see his eyes? He is not scared of me. And Sarah is starting to act weird. The vitamins are wearing off. She asked me about the pony today. She remembers the damn pony, Courtney." Courtney let out a sharp hiss of annoyance. "So increase the dose, give her double. We just need her lucid enough to sign the papers tomorrow morning." "We are not waiting for papers," Bradley said. "I called the realtor. He is bringing a cash buyer at 9 a.m. Some developer who wants to tear it down. He is offering $2.5 million for a quick close." $2.5. Courtney whined. "The appraisal was 3.6. We are losing $1 million. We are losing a headache," Bradley snapped. "We take the cash, we pay off the loan sharks, and we have enough left to disappear to Rio." As for Sarah and her dad, I made a call to Shady Pines. The van is coming at noon. They have an involuntary commitment order. Dr. Thorne signed it an hour ago. We tell the buyers the house comes vacant. By the time anyone asks questions, we will be sipping margaritas on Copacabana Beach. I took the earpiece out. My hand was trembling. Tomorrow. They were selling my house tomorrow morning. They were shipping my daughter to a nightmare facility at noon. And they were going to run with the money I had bled for. I looked at Sarah sleeping in the corner. She was murmuring in her sleep, her face twitching. She was fighting the fog, trying to find her way back to me. I would not let them take her. I would not let them win. I picked up my satellite phone. I typed a new message to Sullivan. Timeline accelerated. They are selling at 0900. Commitment van at 1200. I need you here by 0800. Bring the cavalry. And Sullivan, bring the suit. The one I wore in Zurich. It is time for Reginald Blackwood to rise from the grave. I leaned back against the cold concrete wall. The fear was gone. The hesitation was gone. All that was left was the cold, hard certainty of retribution. Bradley Cooper wanted to play games with the devil. Tomorrow morning he was going to find out that the devil was already in his house, and he was wearing his father's shoes. The morning sun hit the hidden hills like a spotlight on a crime scene. At exactly 8:55, a black Range Rover pulled up to the curb, followed by a sleek sedan. Through the narrow slit of the basement window, I watched them arrive. The realtor was a man named Trent, a guy with too much hair gel and a smile that looked like it was bought on a payment plan. The buyer was different. He was older, dressed in denim and a blazer, the kind of developer who looked at a home and saw only a demolition site. Upstairs, I heard the heavy footsteps of Bradley pacing back and forth. He had been up since dawn, manic and sweating, shouting orders at Courtney and Sarah. He had locked the basement door from the outside with a new padlock he must have found in the garage. He thought a piece of cheap steel could hold me. He thought he was in control. He came to the door one last time, kicking it with his heel. "Listen to me, old man," he hissed through the wood. "If you make a sound, if you so much as cough, I will come down there and finish what the cartel started. Do you hear me?" Silence. I did not answer. I was busy. I was applying a thin layer of grease to the hinge pins of the door. The padlock was on the outside, yes, but the hinges were on the inside. It was a rookie mistake, a structural flaw. Bradley knew how to wear a suit, but he did not know how to build a prison. I heard the front door chime. The game was on. I waited until I heard the murmur of voices in the foyer. They were doing the initial walkthrough, the handshake, the fake pleasantries. Bradley would be charming them, offering them espresso, telling them how much it pained him to sell his beloved family estate. I popped the hinge pins out with a screwdriver I had swiped from his toolbox. It took 3 seconds. The heavy door leaned inward, hanging by the lock, but open enough for me to slip through. I did not rush. I adjusted my coat. I rubbed some coal dust from the furnace onto my face. If I was going to be the crazy old man, I needed to look the part. I crept up the hallway, my boots silent on the runner. I could hear them in the living room. "The foundation is solid, Trent," the realtor was saying, his voice booming. "This is Hidden Hills construction. You could park a tank on this slab." Bradley laughed, a nervous titter. "Absolutely. We have never had a single issue. No cracks, no settling. It is pristine." "That is funny," I boomed, stepping out from the shadows of the hallway. "Because last time I checked, the north retaining wall was shifting 2 inches a year, and the subfloor in the kitchen is rotting from that slow leak behind the dishwasher." The silence in the room was absolute. Bradley spun around his face, draining of color until he looked like a corpse. Courtney dropped the tray of coffee she was holding, the china shattering on the floor. The developer stared at me, his eyes wide, taking in my dirty face, my wild hair, and the intense authority in my voice. "Who the hell is this?" the developer asked, looking from me to Bradley. Bradley stammered, stepping in front of me, trying to use his body as a shield. "He is nobody. He is the gardener. He is mentally unstable. We fired him years ago, but he keeps coming back. Do not listen to a word he says." "The gardener," I repeated, letting out a dry cackle. "I am the man who poured the concrete, Bradley. I am the man who knows where the bodies are buried. Literally." I turned to the developer, ignoring Bradley's attempts to grab my arm. "Listen to me, sir. You look like a smart man. You buy this place, you are buying a money pit. The wiring is not up to code. The pool is leaking into the hillside. One heavy rain, and this whole multi-million-dollar facade slides right down into the canyon. Ask him for the permits. Ask him about the unpermitted guest house foundation." The developer looked at Bradley, his expression hardening. "Is that true? Do you have the permits for the grading?" Bradley was sweating profusely now, sweat dripping down his forehead. "Of course I do. I mean somewhere. I have to find them. This man is lying. He is crazy. Get out of here, old man." I stepped closer to the buyer, lowering my voice to a conspiratorial whisper. "And the mold. Did he tell you about the black mold behind the drywall in the master bedroom? They just painted over it. You can smell it if you get close enough. It is toxic." The developer took a step back, covering his nose instinctively. He looked at the house, then at Bradley with disgust. You know what he said, buttoning his jacket. I think I am going to pass. I do not do mold, and I certainly do not do crazy gardeners. Come on, Trent. Show me the other property. Wait, Bradley screamed, chasing after him. He is lying. The house is perfect. I will drop the price. 2 million. 2 million cash. The developer did not even look back. He got in his car and drove away, leaving Bradley standing in the driveway, watching his escape ticket vanish. Trent, the realtor, shot Bradley a dirty look, muttered something about wasting his time, and sped off behind him. The silence that followed was heavy, loaded with violence. Bradley stood in the open doorway, his back to me, his shoulders heaving. Courtney was sobbing in the corner, picking up pieces of broken china. You ruined it, Bradley whispered. His voice was not loud. It was a low, trembling sound of pure, unadulterated hate. You ruined everything. He turned around slowly. His eyes were bloodshot, his face twisted into a mask of demonic fury. He was no longer the arrogant son-in-law. He was a cornered animal. Get him, he screamed. Not at me, but at the empty air. Or so I thought. From the shadows of the hallway, 2 men stepped out. They were not realtors. They were not investors. They were muscle. Thick necks, cheap leather jackets, knuckles scarred from years of abuse. These were the loan sharks enforcers, the men Bradley owed money to. They had been waiting in the wings, probably to collect their cut the moment the sale closed. Now they were just angry because they were not getting paid. He ruined the deal, Bradley shrieked, pointing a shaking finger at me. He is the reason you are not getting your money. Teach him a lesson. Make him hurt. The bigger one cracked his knuckles and grinned. With pleasure. I braced myself. I was 72 years old, but I knew how to fight. I knew where to strike to break a knee or crush a windpipe. But there were 2 of them, and they were young and strong. And Bradley was joining in, grabbing a heavy brass candlestick from the console table. The first punch caught me in the ribs. I grunted the air, leaving my lungs in a rush. I swung back, connecting with a jaw, but the second man tackled me from behind, slamming me into the wall. I went down hard. Bradley was on me in a second, kicking me in the stomach, in the chest, in the legs. He was screaming incoherent curses, venting years of failure and frustration on my body. Hold him down, Bradley yelled. The 2 goons pinned my arms to the floor. Bradley stood over me, the candlestick raised high. His breathing was ragged, his eyes wild. You think you are smart? He spat. You think you can come into my house and play games? This is my world, old man. Mine. He brought the candlestick down. It hit my shoulder with a sickening crunch. Pain exploded in my arm, white-hot and blinding. I grit my teeth, refusing to cry out. I would not give him the satisfaction. He hit me again and again, bruising bone, tearing skin. Blood ran down my face, blinding me in one eye. Tie him up, Bradley ordered, panting. Tie him to the banister. I want him to watch. I want him to see what happens when you mess with me. They dragged me to the grand staircase and used heavy-duty zip ties to bind my wrists to the wrought iron railing. I slumped against the steps, breathing shallowly, tasting copper and dust. My body was broken, but my mind was clear. I had stopped the sale. I had bought us time. Bradley paced in front of me, wiping sweat and spittle from his mouth. You think you won, he laughed, a jagged, hysterical sound. You just delayed the inevitable. The van is still coming. Shady Pines is expecting a delivery. And now you are going to be in even worse shape when you get there. They love the broken ones. They are easier to manage. He leaned in close as his face inches from mine. And Sarah. Do not worry about her. I will make sure she pays for your sins. She is going to sign those papers even if I have to break every finger on her hand to make her hold the pen. Suddenly a small noise cut through his rant. A whimper. We all looked up. Sarah was standing at the top of the stairs. She was still wearing that ridiculous Maid uniform, but she looked different. Her eyes were not glazed anymore. The vitamins I had swapped were working. The fog of the drugs was lifting, clearing the way for the horror of reality. She looked down at me, her father beaten and bloody tied to her staircase. She looked at her husband, his face twisted with violence, holding a bloody candlestick. Her hands flew to her mouth. Bradley took a step toward the stairs. "Get back in your room, Sarah," he warned. "This does not concern you." She did not move. She stared at me. Her eyes locked onto mine, and for the first time in 13 years, I saw recognition. I saw the daughter I had bounced on my knee, the girl I had walked to school, the woman I had built this house for. She took a trembling step down, then another. "Dad," she whispered. The word was soft, fragile, like glass, but it hit Bradley harder than a fist. He froze. "What did you say?" Sarah ignored him. She kept coming down, her eyes filling with tears. "Dad! Is that you?" "You came back!" Bradley roared in frustration. He ran up the stairs, meeting her halfway. He grabbed her by the hair, yanking her head back. "Shut up," he screamed, shaking her. "He is not your father. Your father is dead. This is just a crazy old bum. Do you hear me? You are crazy." "No," Sarah cried, clawing at his hand. "Let me go. That is my dad. I remember. I remember the pony. I remember the song. Moon River, you lied to me, Bradley. You lied about everything." He slapped her hard enough to knock her against the railing. She cried out, but she did not back down. She looked at him with a hatred so pure it burned. I looked up at her through my swollen eye. "Sarah," I rasped. "I am here, baby. I am here." Bradley raised his hand to hit her again, but stopped when he saw the two goons watching him. Even hired muscle had limits. He shoved her away. "Take her," he ordered the men. "Lock her in the pantry. The van will be here in 2 hours. We are shipping them both out." The men grabbed Sarah. She fought, kicking and screaming, reaching out for me. "Dad, help me. Dad, do not let them take me." I pulled against the zip ties, the plastic biting into my wrists until they bled. "I promise, Sarah," I shouted, my voice cracking. "I promise. It ends tomorrow. Hold on, baby. Just hold on until morning." They dragged her away, her screams echoing through the house I had built with love, now filled with so much hate. Bradley stood over me one last time. "Tomorrow," he sneered. "There is no tomorrow for you, old man. Tomorrow you will be drooling in a padded cell." He walked away, leaving me tied to the stairs, bleeding, broken, but alive. He thought he had won. He thought violence was the ultimate power. But he forgot one thing. He forgot that I had called Sullivan. He forgot that I had a suit waiting. And he forgot that a father's love is the most dangerous force on earth. I closed my eyes and focused on the pain. I let it sharpen me. I let it fuel me. 2 hours. I just needed to survive 2 hours. And then the devil would come for his due. The sun rose over hidden hills, casting long shadows across the driveway, where a white van sat idling like a hearse for the living. It was not a medical transport. It was a prison on wheels with barred windows and a logo that read, "Shady Pines Secure Care Facility." 2 orderlies smoking cigarettes leaned against the hood, waiting for their cargo. Inside the house, the living room had been transformed into a grotesque mockery of a courtroom. Bradley had dragged the heavy mahogany coffee table to the center of the room to serve as a bench. He had arranged chairs in a semicircle. It was theater, pure and simple, designed to give a veneer of legality to a kidnapping. I sat on a wooden chair, my hands no longer zip-tied, but resting heavily on my knees. My shoulder throbbed with a dull, sickening rhythm where the candlestick had hit me. My face was swollen, my lips split, but my eyes were clear. I watched them set the stage. Bradley was wearing a fresh navy suit, his hair slicked back, looking every inch the grieving, concerned guardian. Courtney sat nearby, dressed in black like she was attending a funeral, dabbing at dry eyes with a tissue. She was drinking coffee from one of my porcelain cups, her legs crossed, looking bored and impatient. At 7:30, the players arrived. First came Dr. Thorne, the man who had been poisoning my daughter. He was a small, sweaty man with shifting eyes carrying a thick file that I knew was full of lies. Then came the lawyer, a man named Mr. Sterling, who looked more like a used car salesman than an officer of the court. And finally, the judge. He was not a sitting judge from the Superior Court. He was a retired magistrate Bradley had likely met at the poker tables, a man whose integrity had been sold off years ago to pay for his own vices. They shook hands, laughed softly, and took their places. It was a kangaroo court, assembled in a living room, funded by stolen money. "Bring her out," Bradley ordered. The two goons who had beaten me yesterday dragged Sarah from the pantry. She looked terrible. Her maid uniform was torn and dirty. Her hair was matted. She blinked in the bright morning light, her eyes darting around the room in confusion. When she saw me, she let out a small cry and tried to run to me, but the guards held her back, forcing her into the chair beside mine. "Do not say a word," I whispered to her, not moving my lips. "Just wait." Bradley cleared his throat, and the room went silent. The retired judge adjusted his glasses and opened a folder. "We are here to execute an emergency ex parte guardianship order for Sarah Cooper and her biological father, Reginald Blackwood," he announced, his voice bored and bureaucratic. "Due to the immediate threat of harm to themselves and others, we are bypassing the standard hearing procedures. Dr. Thorne, please present your findings." Dr. Thorne stood up, smoothing his cheap suit. He did not look at me. He looked at the floor, at his papers, anywhere but at the victims. "Your Honor," he began, his voice oily. "I have been treating Mrs. Cooper for 5 years. Her condition has deteriorated rapidly. She suffers from severe cognitive regression, paranoid delusions, and violent outbursts. She is no longer capable of basic self-care. As for Mr. Blackwood, my evaluation yesterday confirmed advanced senile dementia, compounded by aggressive antisocial personality disorder. He believes he is a wealthy tycoon. He is a danger to this family." I sat there, stone-faced. I did not scream. I did not object. I watched the clock on the mantelpiece. 7:45. Sullivan was 15 minutes away. I had to endure 15 minutes of lies. Bradley stood up next. He wiped a non-existent tear from his eye. "Your Honor, this is the hardest thing I have ever had to do. I love my wife. I have spent every penny I have trying to help her. I brought her father here hoping it would spark a memory, but he just attacked me. He tried to burn the house down. Look at my face." He pointed to a small scratch on his cheek, probably self-inflicted. "I am terrified for my safety and the safety of my wife. I just want them to be somewhere safe where they can get the help they need. I am willing to bear the burden of managing the estate to pay for their care." It was a masterclass in manipulation. He painted himself as the martyr, the saint carrying the weight of a broken family. Courtney nodded along, sniffing loudly at the appropriate moments. The judge nodded, scribbling notes that meant nothing. It was all a formality. The decision had been made the moment Bradley transferred the bribe money. "Reginald," the judge said, looking at me over his spectacles, "do you have anything to say for yourself? Do you understand that you are being remanded to a secure facility for the remainder of your natural life?" I looked at the judge. I looked at Bradley, who was smirking behind his hand. I looked at my daughter, who was trembling like a leaf. "I understand perfectly," I said, my voice calm and steady. "I understand that you are about to sign a document that will end your career. I understand that perjury is a felony. And I understand that my son-in-law is a gambling addict who owes 6 figures to the mob." "Order," the judge shouted, slamming his hand on the table. "Silence the accused. This outburst only confirms the diagnosis." Bradley leaned forward, his eyes wide with mock fear. "See, Your Honor. He is delusional. He thinks everyone is a criminal. Please sign the order. Get them out of here before he hurts someone. The room grew suffocatingly hot. The air felt thick with corruption. The judge picked up his pen. It was a gold fountain pen, probably a gift from Bradley. He hovered it over the paper. The order of commitment. The document that would strip us of our freedom, our rights, and our names. I watched the tip of the pen. 7:58. Sarah started to cry, a low, keening sound of despair. "Dad," she whispered, grabbing my hand. "Do not let them take us." "Hold on," I whispered back, my eyes on the clock. 7:59. The judge lowered the pen. The ink touched the paper. Bradley let out a breath, his shoulders sagging in relief. Courtney smiled, a true shark smile, showing all her teeth. They thought it was over. They thought they had won. And then the world exploded. The front door did not just open, it disintegrated. There was a thunderous crash as a battering ram hit the solid oak. Wood splintered and glass shattered, spraying across the foyer. The noise was deafening, like a bomb going off in a library. Bradley jumped to his feet, knocking his chair over. "What the hell is that?" he screamed. Before he could move, the foyer was filled with men. But these were not loan sharks. These were 6 men in tactical gear with security printed on their vests, moving with military precision. They fanned out, securing the room, their weapons drawn but lowered. Behind them strode a man who looked like he owned the very air he breathed. He was tall, wearing a bespoke Italian suit that cost more than Bradley's car, and carrying a leather briefcase that looked like a weapon. It was Sullivan, my lawyer, my friend, the hammer of God. And he was not alone. Flanking him was the county sheriff, a man with a star on his chest and a very unhappy expression. "Nobody move!" Sullivan roared, his voice booming off the vaulted ceilings. "This proceeding is illegal. This court is a sham, and everyone in this room is about to have a very bad day." Bradley stood frozen, his face a mask of shock. "Who are you?" he stammered, his voice cracking. "You cannot barge in here. I am in the middle of a legal hearing. Get out. Get out now." Sullivan did not even look at him. He walked straight to the coffee table and snatched the paper from under the judge's pen. He ripped it in half with a violent motion and threw the pieces in the judge's face. "You are not a judge," Sullivan spat. "You are a retired clerk with a gambling problem. And this," he gestured to the room, "is not a hearing. It is a conspiracy to commit kidnapping and fraud." The sheriff stepped forward, his hand resting on his holster. "Bradley Cooper, you are to step away from the victims immediately." "Dr. Thorne, sit down and keep your hands where I can see them." Courtney let out a shriek and tried to run toward the back door, but one of the security agents blocked her path. His face impassive. "Sit down, ma'am," he said, his voice like gravel. Bradley looked around frantically, realizing his control had evaporated in seconds. He looked at the shattered door, the armed men, the furious sheriff. Then he looked at me. I stood up. I shook off the hand of the guard who had been holding me. I straightened my ragged coat. I wiped the blood from my eye. "You asked who he was, Bradley," I said, my voice cutting through the chaos. "He is my lawyer, and he is here to evict the trash." Bradley's face turned a shade of purple I had never seen before. "Evict. You are the trash, old man. This is my house. I have the deed. I have the power of attorney. Sheriff, arrest this man. He is trespassing. He is dangerous." Sullivan laughed. A cold, dry sound. "You have a piece of paper, Bradley. A piece of paper signed by a woman you drugged into submission. A woman who did not have the legal right to sign it in the first place." "What are you talking about?" Bradley yelled, spit flying from his mouth. "It was her house. She gave it to me." Sullivan opened his briefcase. He pulled out a thick document bound in blue leather. It looked ancient and important. "Wrong," Sullivan said. 13 years ago, before Reginald Blackwood disappeared, he placed this property and all his assets into an irrevocable dynasty trust, the Blackwood Family Trust. Sarah Blackwood is the beneficiary. She has the right to live here. She has the right to use the funds. But she does not have the title. She does not own the bricks, Bradley. The trust does. And the trust has a very specific clause. Sullivan paused, letting the silence stretch until it was painful. Clause 0. He read his eyes locking onto Bradley's. If the beneficiary is under duress, coerced, or abused, the trustee has the immediate power to revoke all privileges and reclaim the assets. And who is the trustee? Bradley whispered, his voice trembling. I stepped forward. I took the document from Sullivan. I looked at the man who had tormented my daughter, who had beaten me, who had tried to bury us alive. I am, I said. The color drained from Bradley's face so fast, I thought he might faint. He looked at me, really looked at me for the first time. He did not see the homeless man anymore. He saw the predator. He saw the man who had survived hell and come back to bring it with him. You, he gasped. You are the billionaire, the one who vanished. I am the father, I corrected him, and you are trespassing in my home. Courtney started to cry loud, ugly sobs. Bradley, she wailed. You said he was a nobody. You said we were going to be rich. Bradley ignored her. He was staring at the sheriff, then at the security team, then at the open door where his freedom was rapidly disappearing. It is a lie, he shouted, lunging toward the table, trying to grab the papers. It is a forgery. You are all lying. The sheriff moved faster than a man his size should be able to. He grabbed Bradley by the shoulder and spun him around, slamming him face first onto the mahogany table. That is enough, the sheriff growled. You have the right to remain silent. Though I suggest you start using it now, because you have dug yourself a hole deep enough to reach China. I watched as they cuffed him. I watched as the arrogance finally died in his eyes, replaced by the cold reality of consequences. I walked over to Sarah, who was watching the scene with wide, unbelieving eyes. I knelt beside her and took her hands. They were cold, but they were free. It is over, baby, I whispered. The master is gone. Daddy is home. She looked at me, and then she looked at Bradley, writhing in handcuffs. A spark of something returned to her eyes. It was not just memory. It was life. Is he going away? She asked, her voice small. Yes, I said. For a very long time. Sullivan stepped up beside me. We are not done, Reginald. The sheriff is taking them in for the fraud, but we need to nail the coffin shut. We need the rest of the evidence. I stood up and looked at Bradley one last time. He was looking at me with a mixture of hatred and begging. You cannot do this, he spat. I am her husband. I have rights. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the small digital recorder I had retrieved from under his bed before the hearing began. I also pulled out the USB drive containing the data from the bug I planted. You have the right to an attorney, I said. And you are going to need a really good one. Because I have you on tape, Bradley. I have you planning the commitment. I have you admitting to the forgery. And I have something else. I signaled to Sullivan. He nodded and pulled a final document from his briefcase. We dug up the old police report, Bradley, I said. The one from 5 years ago. The car accident. Bradley's eyes went wide with terror. Genuine terror. We know you cut the brake lines, I said softly so only he could hear. We found the mechanic you paid off. He is in custody too. Bradley's knees buckled. The fight went out of him. He sagged against the table, a broken man. Get him out of here, I told the sheriff. Before I forget that I am a civilized man. As they dragged him out screaming and crying, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders that I had been carrying for 13 years. The house was a mess. The windows were broken. But for the first time since I bought it, the air inside felt clean. Bradley scrambled for the briefcase he had left near the makeshift judge's bench, his hands shaking so violently he could barely work the latches. He pulled out a sheaf of papers, waving them in the air like a shield. "You are lying!" he screamed, his voice cracking with desperation. "Look at this. This is a grant deed. It is signed by Sarah. It is notarized. It is filed with the county recorder. I own this property. It is black and white. It is public record. You cannot just walk in here with some fancy leather binder and declare it void. This is America. Paperwork matters." Sullivan did not even blink. He looked at the frantic man with the kind of pity a lion might feel for a gazelle that does not realize its leg is already broken. "Bradley," he said, his voice calm and resonant, filling the silent room. "You are right about one thing. Paperwork matters. But you have to read the fine print, specifically the title history." Sullivan opened his blue binder and laid it on the mahogany table, smoothing the page with a gloved hand. He gestured for the sheriff to come closer. "Sheriff, if you would be so kind. Look at the original deed of transfer from 13 years ago. Who is listed as the grantor?" The sheriff leaned in, squinting at the document. "It says the Blackwood Dynasty Trust." "Correct," Sullivan said. "And who is the grantee?" The sheriff looked closer. "The Blackwood Dynasty Trust." "Exactly," Sullivan said, turning his gaze back to Bradley. "You see, Bradley, when Reginald bought this house, he did not buy it in his name. He did not buy it in Sarah's name. He bought it in the name of a legal entity designed to exist in perpetuity, an irrevocable trust. Do you know what irrevocable means, Bradley? It means it cannot be changed, it cannot be altered, and it certainly cannot be signed away by a beneficiary who does not hold the title." Bradley was breathing hard now, sweat pouring down his face. "But Sarah lived here," he stammered. "She signed the transfer. She acted as the owner. She acted as the occupant." Sullivan corrected him sharply. "The trust granted her usage rights, the right to live here, the right to enjoy the property. But usage rights are not ownership rights. You cannot sell what you do not own. It is like renting a car and trying to sell it to a dealership. It is not just impossible, it is fraud. The document you have in your hand, the one you forced her to sign, is worthless. It is a piece of paper signed by a tenant claiming to be a landlord. The county clerk only accepted it because you forged the supporting affidavits, but under scrutiny, it dissolves like smoke." I watched Bradley trying to process this. His entire scheme, his entire future was built on that piece of paper. He had brainwashed my daughter, he had drugged her, he had beaten me, all for a signature that had no legal power. "But we have been here for years," Bradley insisted, his voice rising to a shriek. "Possessory rights, squatters' rights, something. You cannot just kick us out." Sullivan closed the binder with a snap. "We are not kicking you out based on property law, Bradley. We are removing you based on the violation of the trust covenant. When you married Sarah, you signed a prenuptial agreement, did you not?" "I did," Bradley said quickly. "But that was voided when she became incompetent." "That is what my lawyer said." "Your lawyer is an idiot," Sullivan said. "The trust supersedes the marriage, and the trust has very specific rules about who is allowed to reside on the premises." Sullivan turned a page in the binder. He looked at me and gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. It was time for the final nail. "Read it," Sullivan said to me. "Read them, Clause 0. I stepped forward. The pain in my shoulder was a dull roar, now eclipsed by the adrenaline of victory. I looked at the document Sullivan held out. I did not need to read it. I had written it. I had dictated these words 13 years ago in a lawyer's office in Zurich, knowing that the world was a dangerous place and that my daughter needed armor, not just walls. Clause 0, I recited from memory, my voice filling the foyer. In the event that any beneficiary or resident of the trust property engages in acts of physical abuse, psychological manipulation, chemical coercion, or financial duress against another beneficiary. The trustee retains the absolute right to trigger immediate expulsion. All assets, privileges, and access are revoked retroactively. The offender is deemed a hostile combatant against the estate and is liable for all damages incurred during their occupation. The color drained from Bradley's face until he looked like a wax figure. He looked at Courtney, who was frozen near the door. He looked at the sheriff, who was now unholstering his handcuffs. Retroactively, Bradley whispered, "What does that mean?" "It means," Sullivan answered, "that you have never legally lived here. It means for the last 5 years, since the abuse began, you have been trespassing. It means every dollar of the trust's money you spent on cars, on clothes, on gambling, was theft. It means you do not just leave with nothing. It means you leave with a debt you can never repay." Bradley dropped the deed. It fluttered to the floor, landing in the broken glass of the front door. He backed away, shaking his head. "No, no, this is a trick. You are just a homeless man. You cannot be the trustee. You are dead." I looked at him. I looked at my dirty coat, my worn boots, the coal dust on my hands. He was right. I did look like a homeless man. I looked like a victim, and victims do not strike fear into the hearts of men like Bradley. It was time to shed the skin. Sullivan reached behind the security team and picked up a garment bag that one of the guards had been holding. He walked over to me and unzipped it. Inside was a charcoal gray suit, bespoke tailored from Italian wool, a crisp white shirt, a silk tie, and a pair of polished Oxfords that cost more than Bradley's Porsche. I took off the ragged coat and let it drop to the floor. It landed on top of Bradley's useless deed, burying it in filth. I unbuttoned the flannel shirt I had worn for weeks, revealing the scars on my chest from my time in captivity. I grabbed a bottle of water from the table, poured it into my hands, and washed the coal dust and dried blood from my face. I slicked back my gray hair. I dressed right there in the foyer. I put on the white shirt, buttoning it with steady hands. I pulled on the trousers. I tied the tie in a perfect Windsor knot without needing a mirror. I shrugged into the jacket, feeling the familiar weight of quality tailoring. It fit like a second skin. Finally, I stepped into the shoes. When I looked up, I was not the old man from the basement anymore. I stood taller. My posture shifted. The hunch I had feigned was gone, replaced by the bearing of a man who had built skyscrapers and commanded boardrooms. I adjusted my cuffs and looked at Bradley. The transformation was physical, but the effect was psychological. Bradley stared at me as if he were seeing a ghost manifest into flesh. He saw the power now. He saw the authority. He saw the monster he had poked. "Reginald Blackwood," I said, my voice dropping to the low, commanding timbre that used to silence negotiating tables. "Chairman of Blackwood International, trustee of the Sarah Blackwood estate, and your executioner." Bradley fell to his knees. It was not a choice. His legs simply gave out. He looked up at me, terror streaming from his eyes. "Please," he wheezed. "Reginald. Mr. Blackwood. I did not know. I swear I did not know. We can work this out. I can pay you back. I can work. I will do anything." I walked over to him. The sound of my expensive shoes on the marble was sharp and authoritative. I looked down at him with zero empathy. "You can pay me back?" I asked. I turned to Sullivan. "What is the current valuation of the damages, Sullivan?" Sullivan pulled a calculator from his pocket. He punched in a few numbers. "Well, sir, factoring in the theft of funds, the unauthorized sale of assets, the physical damage to the property, the medical costs for Sarah's recovery, and the punitive damages triggered by Clause 0, which mandates a 10 times multiplier for abuse." He looked at the screen. $36 million, Sullivan said. Bradley made a sound like a dying animal. 36 million. He did not have $36. I leaned down, getting right in Bradley's face. You owe me $36 million, Bradley. And since you cannot pay, I am going to take it out of your future. I am going to garnish every paycheck you ever earn. I am going to seize every asset you ever acquire. You will never own a car again. You will never own a home again. You will work for the rest of your miserable life, and every cent will come to me. I stood up and turned to Courtney. She was trying to make herself small, trying to disappear into the wallpaper. And you, I said. She jumped. I was just the employee, she stammered, her arrogance gone, replaced by a pathetic survival instinct. I did what he told me. He said he owned everything. He said Sarah was crazy. I am a victim too. I laughed. It was a harsh sound. You are wearing my daughter's necklace. You are wearing her clothes. You helped him poison her. You kicked me when I was down. I pointed to the door. Run, I said. Courtney looked at me, then at Bradley kneeling on the floor crying. She looked at the necklace around her throat. She fumbled with the clasp, tearing it off and throwing it onto the table. I am leaving, she said. I am leaving him. I never want to see him again. She did not even look at Bradley. She grabbed her purse and ran for the shattered door, her heels clicking frantically on the marble. She was a rat fleeing a sinking ship. Bradley watched her go, his hand reaching out weakly. Courtney, he whispered, do not leave me. She was gone. He was alone, surrounded by the police, the lawyers, and the family he had tried to destroy. I looked at the sheriff. He is all yours, I said. The sheriff stepped forward, pulling Bradley to his feet. He slapped the cuffs on him tight. Bradley Cooper, you are under arrest for fraud, embezzlement, elder abuse, and conspiracy. As they dragged him toward the door, Bradley started to scream. But it was not a scream of anger anymore. It was the scream of a man who realized he had just woken up from a dream into a nightmare he would never escape. I turned to Sarah. She was sitting in the chair watching me. She looked at the suit. She looked at my face. She smiled a small, tentative smile. You look nice, Dad, she whispered. I walked over to her and knelt down, ruining the crease in my trousers. I took her hands. It is over, honey, I said. The bad man is gone. Sullivan cleared his throat. Not quite gone, sir. We still have the criminal charges. The fraud is enough to put him away for 20 years. But if you want to make sure he never sees the light of day again, we need to play the recording. I stood up and reached into the pocket of my new suit where I had transferred the digital recorder. Do it, I said. Let us bury him. Bradley Cooper was not a man who knew when to fold. Even with the handcuffs biting into his wrists and the sheriff holding him by the collar, he continued to scream. He twisted his body toward Sarah, his eyes wild with a manic desperation that was painful to watch. He was playing his last card, the only one he had left, the card of the devoted, suffering husband. Sarah, tell them, he pleaded, his voice cracking with manufactured emotion. Tell them how I took care of you for 5 years, who fed you when you could not hold a spoon, who bathed you, who changed your sheets. Me. I did that. Not this man. Not this stranger who abandoned you for 13 years to play gangster in South America. I was here. I was the one holding your hand in the hospital when you woke up from the coma. He looked at the sheriff, tears streaming down his face. Officer, you cannot arrest me for fraud. I am her legal guardian. I am her husband. Everything I did to keep a roof over her head. The trust money was gone, so I had to be creative. Was it legal? Maybe not perfectly, but it was moral. I saved her life. If it were not for me, she would be dead. Sarah looked at him. Her lower lip trembled. For a second, I saw the doubt in her eyes. The brainwashing ran deep. 5 years of dependency is hard to break in an hour. Bradley saw the hesitation and lunged for it. "Baby, please," he sobbed. "Do not let them take me. I am the only one who truly knows you. I am your master." Remember the use of that word. The master sent a shiver of revulsion through the room. Sullivan looked at me, his expression grim. He nodded. It was time to strip away the mask of the martyr and reveal the monster underneath. Bradley was not a savior. He was a failed executioner. I stepped between Bradley and my daughter, breaking his line of sight. I looked down at him, my face like stone. "You say you saved her life, Bradley," I said, my voice low and hard. "You say you were there when she woke up from the coma. But you left out the part about why she was in a coma in the first place. You keep talking about the accident as if it were an act of God, as if it were bad luck." "It was an accident," Bradley stammered, blinking rapidly. "It was raining. The road was slick. She lost control. The police report says so. The police report says what you paid them to say. I corrected him. But cars leave evidence, Bradley. And mechanics talk, especially when they are facing federal prison time." I held up the digital recorder. It was a small black device, but in that moment it looked like a judge's gavel. I pressed play. The audio was grainy, recorded in a wind tunnel of static, but the voice was unmistakable. It was Bradley speaking to someone on a phone line I had intercepted 5 years ago, but could not use until I was physically here to enforce it. The recording filled the silent foyer. It was Bradley's voice, younger, less desperate, but infinitely colder. "She is taking the car to the coast tomorrow. I cut the primary line but left the secondary frayed. It will hold until she hits the canyon curves. When she hits the brakes at 50 miles an hour, the pressure will blow the line. She will go right over the guardrail. No survivors, just a tragic young widow and a grieving husband with a double indemnity policy." The recording ended with a click. The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating. Bradley stopped crying. He stopped breathing. He stared at the recorder as if it were a venomous snake. But I was not done. I signaled Sullivan. He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a sworn affidavit signed and notarized just yesterday. "This is from Marcus, the wrench," Sullivan announced, his voice ringing with authority. "The mechanic you hired to inspect the wreckage before the insurance adjuster arrived. You paid him $10,000 to overlook the cut lines. But Marcus got picked up on a separate charge last night. And to cut a deal, he gave us you. He kept the cut brake line, Bradley. He kept it in a safe for 5 years as insurance against you. We have the line. We have the tool marks. And they match the wire cutters we found in your garage this morning." I watched Sarah. She was not trembling anymore. She was standing very still, her eyes fixed on the floor. Her mind was racing, connecting the dots. The crash, the fear, the way the pedal had gone soft under her foot, the way the car had accelerated instead of stopping. It was not her fault. She was not a bad driver. She was a target. Bradley tried to speak, but only a croak came out. That is fake. It is AI. It is a deep fake." "It is over, Bradley," I said. "You did not save her. You tried to kill her for the life insurance. And when she survived, when she had the audacity to live, you decided to kill her soul instead. You drugged her to keep her quiet. You made her a servant to punish her for not dying. You are not a husband. You are a butcher who failed to finish the job." The realization hit the room like a physical blow. The security guards tightened their grip on their weapons, looking at Bradley with pure disgust. Even Courtney, the mistress, recoiled, stepping away from him, as if his evil were contagious. He was naked before us, stripped of his lies, his excuses, and his humanity. He was just a man who had tried to murder his wife for money. Sarah made a sound. It was a low, guttural growl that started deep in her chest. She lifted her head. Her eyes were dry. There were no tears left. There was only a fire so hot it burned away the last remnants of the drugs in her system. She walked towards him. Her steps were slow, deliberate. She was wearing a torn maid's uniform. Her feet were bare and dirty, but in that moment, she looked like a queen walking to an execution. Sarah Bradley whispered, shrinking back against the sheriff's grip. "Sarah, baby, listen." She did not listen. She walked right up to him until she was inches from his face. She looked at the man who had been her world, her tormentor, her master. She looked at the lips that had kissed her and then ordered her to scrub the floor. "You killed me," she said, her voice steady and cold as ice. "You killed the girl I was. You killed the mother I was going to be. You made me think I was crazy. You made me think I was worthless." Bradley opened his mouth to lie again, to beg again. Sarah drew back her hand and struck him. It was not a slap. It was a blow delivered with 5 years of repressed rage. Her palm connected with his cheek with a crack that echoed like a gunshot. Bradley's head snapped back. Blood flew from his split lip. She hit him again and again. She was screaming now wordless sounds of fury and liberation. She was beating the ghost of the master out of him. She was reclaiming her body, her mind, her life. "I am not your servant," she screamed, clawing at his expensive suit, tearing the fabric. "I am Sarah Blackwood. I am the owner of this house. And you are nothing. You are dirt." The sheriff let her get in a few good hits before he gently pulled her back. He did not do it to protect Bradley. He did it to protect Sarah from catching a charge. "That is enough, Mom," the sheriff said softly. "He is not worth bruising your hands." Sarah collapsed against me, sobbing into my chest. I wrapped my arms around her, shielding her from the sight of the man who had broken her. I felt her shaking, but it was not fear anymore. It was the release of a prisoner who had finally walked out of the jail cell. "Get him out of here," I roared over her head. "Get him out of my sight before I kill him myself." The sheriff nodded to his deputies. They hauled Bradley up. He was limp, bleeding from his lip, and his nose, his eyes vacant. The fight was gone. The con was over. "Wait," Bradley mumbled as they dragged him toward the shattered door. "Wait. Dad. Reginald. Please." He looked at me with eyes that begged for a miracle, for a loophole, for mercy. "I am family," he wheezed. "We are family. You cannot send family to prison." I looked at him. I looked at the wreckage of my home. I looked at my weeping daughter. "You are right," I said, my voice dead. "We were family. But you filed for divorce the day you cut those brake lines. Take him away." They dragged him out into the bright California sun. He screamed as they shoved him into the back of the cruiser, a primal sound of a man who knows he is going to a cage he will never leave. Courtney was led out after him in a separate car, her head down, her life of luxury over. I stood in the foyer holding my daughter, listening to the sirens fade into the distance. The house was silent again. The nightmare was over. But as I looked at the bruises on Sarah's arms, I knew the real work was just beginning. Justice had been served. Now it was time for healing. And for the first time in 13 years, I was exactly where I needed to be. The sound of the sirens faded into the distance, leaving a ringing silence in their wake. The house stood quiet, its grand foyer a battlefield littered with shattered glass and the remnants of a destroyed life. But it was not over. Not yet. I looked at the debris of Bradley Cooper's existence scattered around my home. The ugly portraits on the wall, the tacky furniture he had bought with stolen money, the lingering scent of his cheap cologne. It felt like a disease that had infected the very bones of the building. "Clear it out." I ordered the security team, my voice echoing in the empty hall. "All of it. I want every trace of him gone." The men moved with efficiency. They tore down the portraits of Bradley and Courtney, throwing them onto the driveway with a satisfying crash. They hauled out the leather sofas, the glass tables, the pretentious statues. It all went into a pile on the front lawn. Neighbors were starting to gather at their windows, watching the spectacle, but I did not care. Let them watch. Let them see the exorcism. I walked to the pile. I pulled a lighter from my pocket, the same Zippo I had carried for 13 years. I flicked it open, the flame dancing in the breeze. "Burn it," I said. One of the guards poured lighter fluid over the heap. I tossed the lighter. The fire roared to life, consuming the symbols of Bradley's reign. The smoke rose into the sky, black and thick, carrying away the last vestiges of his poison. I watched the flames reflecting in the windows of the house. It was not just furniture burning. It was the past. It was the pain. It was the memory of a man who had tried to steal our souls. Sarah stood beside me, wrapped in a blanket one of the guards had given her. She watched the fire, her face pale but calm. "Is it really over?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "It is over," I promised, putting my arm around her. "He can never hurt you again." But the physical cleanup was the easy part. The real work, the healing, had to happen inside. I signaled to Sullivan. The helicopter was waiting. We were not staying here tonight. This house needed to be scrubbed, sanitized, and restored before it could be a home again. And Sarah needed care that went beyond a blanket and a hug. We flew to a private medical facility in the mountains, a place of quiet luxury and world-class care. I spared no expense. Sarah was checked into a suite overlooking a pine forest, far away from the smog and the memories of hidden hills. Doctors swarmed around her, treating her malnutrition, her bruises, and the lingering effects of the drugs. I sat by her bedside for 3 days. I watched her sleep. I watched her eat. I watched the color slowly return to her cheeks. On the 4th day, she woke up and looked at me with eyes that were fully present. The drugs were gone. The brainwashing was broken. She was Sarah again. "Dad," she said, reaching for my hand. "You stayed." I squeezed her fingers, fighting back tears. "I am never leaving again, Sarah. I made a mistake 13 years ago. I thought I could protect you by hiding, by building a fortune in the shadows. I thought money was safety. I was wrong. Money is just a tool. Presence is safety. Love is safety. I should have come back sooner. I should have torn the world apart to get to you." She shook her head, a sad smile on her lips. "You are here now. That is what matters." "But Dad, how did you survive?" "Bradley told me you were a criminal. He said you died in a gutter." I told her the truth. All of it. The kidnapping, the ransom, the years in the hole, the escape, the rebuilding. I told her about the nights I spent staring at the moon, wondering if she was looking at it too. I told her about the empire I built, not for greed, but for her. "I did it all for you," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "Every dollar, every deal, every ruthless decision. It was all so you would never have to be afraid. And instead, I left you alone with a monster. I am so sorry, Sarah. Can you ever forgive me?" Sarah pulled me into a hug, burying her face in my shoulder. "There is nothing to forgive," she whispered. "You came back. You saved me. You are my hero, Dad. Just like you always were." We cried together, father and daughter, washing away the years of pain and separation. It was the beginning of a new chapter, a chapter where secrets had no place and where love was the only currency that mattered. 6 months later. The Hidden Hills house was unrecognizable. The dark, heavy furniture was gone, replaced by light, airy pieces that let the sunshine in. The walls were painted soft colors. The garden was blooming with roses and lavender. It was no longer a fortress or a prison. It was a home. Sarah walked into the living room carrying a stack of files. She looked radiant. She had gained weight, her hair was shiny and styled, and she wore clothes that fit her perfectly. She was the executive director of the Blackwood Foundation, a charity we had established to help victims of financial abuse and domestic coercion. We just got the approval for the new shelter, she said, her eyes shining with excitement. It is going to have 20 beds, legal aid services, and trauma counseling. We are going to help so many people, Dad. I smiled, watching her. She had taken her pain and turned it into power. She was not just a survivor, she was a warrior. That is wonderful, honey. You are doing good work. The doorbell rang. It was Sullivan. He came in carrying a small envelope. The final judgment, he said, handing it to me. I opened it. Bradley Cooper had been sentenced to 25 years in federal prison without the possibility of parole. His assets had been seized, his reputation destroyed. He would die in a cage, just like he deserved. Courtney had turned state's evidence and received a lighter sentence, but she would spend the next decade on probation working minimum wage jobs to pay back her share of the restitution. Justice was served cold and absolute. I tossed the letter onto the table. It did not matter anymore. They were the past. We were the future. We went out onto the patio. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of gold and violet. A little boy about 4 years old was running across the grass chasing a golden retriever. It was Leo, Sarah's son, from a brief relationship before Bradley. Bradley had sent him away to boarding school, claiming he was a distraction. I had brought him home the day after the arrest. Grandpa, watch this, Leo shouted, throwing a ball for the dog. I laughed, the sound deep and genuine. Good throw, Leo. I sat in my rocking chair, sipping iced tea, watching my daughter and grandson. I thought about the man I used to be, the ruthless tycoon, who thought he could control the world with money. I thought about the man I was in the hole, desperate and alone. And I thought about the man I was now. I had $36 million in the bank. I had properties all over the world. I had power, influence, and respect. But as I looked at Sarah laughing with her son, I realized that none of that mattered. The true wealth was not in the safe. It was right here on the lawn. It was the sound of my grandson's laughter. It was the light in my daughter's eyes. It was the peace of knowing that they were safe and that I was here to keep them that way. I had spent a lifetime chasing security, building walls, accumulating assets. But in the end, the only thing that could truly protect us was the truth. The truth had set us free. I closed my eyes, listening to the wind in the trees. I was Reginald Blackwood. I had been a ghost, I had been a prisoner. I had been a monster to my enemies. But today I was just a father and a grandfather, and that was the only title I ever wanted. If you enjoyed this story of justice and redemption, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Let me know in the comments what you would have done in my place. Would you have forgiven? Would you have taken the money? Or would you have burned it all down to save the ones you love? Until next time, stay safe and remember, family is not just blood. It is who stands by you when the fire comes. I spent 13 years building an empire of wealth to protect my daughter, believing that financial security was the ultimate shield against the world's cruelty. I was wrong. Money is a powerful tool. It can buy the best lawyers and the strongest locks, but it cannot buy safety. True safety comes from presence. It comes from standing guard over the ones you love, not from the shadows, but right beside them. Evil men like Bradley thrive in the vacuum left by absent protectors. The greatest legacy we leave isn't written in a trust fund or a property deed. It is written in the courage to show up to fight and to never let go of your family. If you believe that true justice is worth fighting for no matter the cost, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more stories of retribution and redemption.